So I'll go ahead and get started now.
Yeah.
We have our participants here. So essentially, firstly, a very warm welcome to the panelists here, and I will introduce each of them. Most of them have been part of this initiative called the CityFix Labs, which WRI has hosted over the last 2 years. And in a quick nutshell, I would just like to tell you about what the CityFix Labs was about. It was an initiative undertaken by WRI India with the objective of identifying innovative solutions in the space of waste, water, and energy, which are critical to urban service delivery and improving gaps and efficiencies. And through customized capacity building, we selected, it was a competitive challenge, and we selected about 10 companies, 5 of whom are represented here, and basically took them through a customized capacity building exercise and a networking exercise, where we were trying to help them overcome barriers, whether it was of finance, markets, or whatever else, to scaling. And so we wanted to have this conversation with all the entrepreneurs, and some of the mentors are here, and I would like to acknowledge them as well, who helped them through this whole process during the CityFix Labs. And basically what has happened is, over the last few months with the COVID-19 situation, a lot of our startups have had to reorganize, they have had to rethink and introspect about new ways of growing. They have had operational challenges, and they've had other kinds of opportunities knocking on their door as well. And so we want to talk about how some of these startups have successfully repurposed, and not just for the short term, but hopefully for the long term, and how most of them are going to be going to be useful for the service delivery sector in the future. And so this is a conversation to engage all of us here. And I also want to say that, the last few months have seen an unusual situation for all of us, where it has tested the resilience of our systems, of our communities, of us as individuals. All of that has been tested. And I think it's a time to also introspect about, from the industry perspective, and re-examine and explore opportunities where we can make products, innovation, and the service design resourceful and more efficient. Because social stability and economic stability are hand in hand, and one does not happen without the other. Businesses will need to be successful, and can only be successful when societies are successful, and we need to find ways to make that happen. So today we have this group of stakeholders who've been working in the space of sustainability and urban service delivery relentlessly. And we want to talk to them about their recent experiences, challenges, opportunities, and what the future direction of travel holds. So with that, I would like to just quickly introduce who our panelists are for the day. And what I would also like to do is, when I come to you, you'll talk about your solution, or basically a little bit, 2 minutes, spend 2 minutes on the sector that you work in, what your priorities are, and also what, why you do what you do. So that would be really helpful. So starting with Abhilash Haridas, he's the co-founder and chief of growth and strategy, WeGot Utilities. And WeGot is basically helping make the water systems and infrastructure very efficient. Then we have Asim Bhalirao. He's the co-founder of Fluid Robotics. Fluid Robotics builds multi-sensor robots and machine learning models to map pipes and identify their health. Again, to identify water leakages, and now they have pivoted to a new model. Gokul Srinivas is here. He's founder CEO of Minion Labs. Minion Labs product, the Minion, is basically an energy efficiency and auditing device that can help you, become more efficient in your utility, the energy utility. Then we have Rahul Nenani. He's co-founder and CEO of Radhi Connect. Radhi Connect is a waste management service out of Bombay, and provides doorstep pickup service to an aggregated network of Radhiwalas, and he'll talk about that. And then we have Marwan. He is with Hasirudala Innovations. It is a decentralized franchisee model seeking to empower waste pickers and making them entrepreneurs by creating predictable livelihoods for them. And been working in Bangalore for a long time and in other cities. From the investors, we have Nagraj Prakasan. He's partner Acumen and a full-time angel investor with extensive service, 16 startups, and he's seen 3 exits. He's been actively involved in mentoring a lot of our CityFix Lab startups as well. Then we have CM Patil, who is the CEO of Sandbox Startups. He is a leading expert of Sandbox startups based in Hubli, which caters to basically rural and semi-urban government and private customer base. And finally, we have Vignesh Nandkumar, who's partner at LGT Lightstone Aspada. Vignesh is a partner at Aspada and has 15 years of technology and renewable energy focus on building clean tech and renewable energy. And we also have Lenny with us, who's a public health expert, and she will talk more about the public health angle of where this is going, where this needs to go, and what specific gaps still remain from a policy and application standpoint. So with that, I will like to start the question session, the panel. And first, I will like to go to the entrepreneurs, because the entrepreneurs, by definition, you're individuals who operate in uncertainty, and therefore you're better also equipped by experience to meet the uncertainties that were posed by COVID-19 situation. And all of you have found ways to make the most of it, either by upskilling or upgrading or repurposing. And the thing that I first would like you to share is that what solutions are you bringing to solve the challenges of urban public service delivery? And then what challenges have you faced specifically during this time of the last couple of months of the lockdown, and how have you adapted? So I would like to first start with you, Abhilash Vigot. And basically I want to ask you, firstly, what changes have you seen in the residential water consumption over the last couple of months? Are these good changes? And if they're good changes, are they here to stay? But before that, Abhilash, if you could just say, a couple of lines about what you do, why you do it, and also what your product is about. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, hi everyone. So WeGot has built an IoT-based water management platform, which empowers people to become more conscious of their water usage. We detect usage, abnormal usages, leakages, and give you notifications in real time. And you'll be able to act on this by clicking a button on your mobile phone. You also become more accountable when you start paying for your own consumption. So that's something else that we do. And we also enable the facility manager managing the property to manage it more efficiently and make sure that there isn't any wastage. So this is what we do. Why we do this is because it also has to do with where I come from. I come from Chennai, and this has been a big problem. It's been all over the news, and we wanted to build something where we could make a difference. So I have 4 other co-founders with me, and we put our heads together. Each of us bring different skills. One of us is good at selling, one of us builds the hardware, one of us builds the application. So we started out in 2015 with the intent of making sure everybody is part of the solution. Every house that has the solution will be able to make more actionable decisions as far as their water consumption is concerned. So this is what we do.
Great. And
is there a specific?
Yes, and would you like to go in now into what changes you've been seeing in the residential water consumption over the last couple of months, and what are the challenges that you have personally faced as we go?
So I'm going to break this into 2 segments. So as soon as the lockdown started, there was a spike in consumption because everybody was suddenly at home, and there was now you have to wash your hands for 20 seconds, and you have to be careful about sanitizing your hands. People do it quite often, and there was a spike. I'd say about a 20% increase. I mean, it's not 20% uniform; it's 20% across. We also can classify buildings as 2 bedrooms. And a building in Chennai will react a little differently than a building in Hyderabad, maybe. So, but on an average, about 20% increase was there in the usage. And over the last month, let's say in May, that 20% has now also started coming down. So I'd say that from an average of 100 liters per person per day, it went up to 120 liters. And we're at about 110 liters right now. It's still a little bit more than what it was before COVID, but before the lockdown. But it's slowly coming down a little bit again right now.
Is it because people have stopped washing their hands, or is it because they've started deploying efficiency measures?
I have no way of saying why this has happened, but I think people have started realizing, so because at the end of the month, you have a bill to pay. Right, and you want to be more conscious of how much you're using. And see, because COVID has happened doesn't mean the water problem has gone away. Right, you still have to buy your tanker lorries. Only then you will have water. So they've started figuring out. the one thing that we have seen is the number of tickets that we have gotten has increased multifold. And these are not tickets that the product's not working, but people are conscious and people ping us and ask us for data. I mean, it's a data request that they want. They say, hey, what about my use 6 months ago? All of this information, they are reaching out to us. So it feels like people are thinking about their usage right now. And maybe that's why people are using consumption.
Great. And Abhilash, do you want to tell us quickly about your challenges over the last 3 months and what have you done?
So we've had two types of challenges. One was a positive challenge. More people at home means more water that consumes, and also meant that we don't get to sell directly. It's all we've had more time to spend and invest on digital marketing. So we got a lot of inquiries. I mean, I'd say what was about 200 inquiries a month went up to about 850 inquiries in April. Right? So it was a problem of too many and how we have to handle them. That's the good problem to have. Now, a lot of these order inquiries are slowly turning into orders, but there's no way we're going to be able to deploy any of this because manpower is still a very big challenge. So that is a problem that we're looking to overcome at this point. I mean, we don't have a very clear answer on this yet, but we're trying to work and prioritize where we can close quickly and move people. We're also now trying to partner up with developers themselves, where they already have a large enough plumbing team and a electrical team and a structural team to see if we can train them and they can do the work for us. So that's something that we are looking at, have already agreed to this. So we feel like this can become a sustainable model even in the future where we don't have to worry about the labor.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll now move on to Rahul from Radhi Connect. Rahul, are you here?
Yes, hi Jaya.
Hi, Rahul. So Rahul, again, if you could just speak about what you do and the whole notion that you qualified as an essential service during this whole lockdown period, but still, what were some of the challenges you faced despite of that?
Yeah, sure. So we've been operational since 2015. We're a waste management startup working on diverting waste away from landfills back into the economy so that it can be recycled, reused, or repurposed. We do this with a multi-stakeholder approach where we work with citizens and consumers at one level. We work with brands and FMCG companies to mitigate their plastic footprint, and as well as government to help set up infrastructure so that they can manage their waste at their level as well. So, like you mentioned, yes. So even though there was a lockdown or COVID, waste is still being generated on a day-to-day basis. So even though the cities stand still, our waste is being generated. So our service was still running. We actually did not stop our service for even one day during the entire lockdown that was there. Initially, we did face a few difficulties with regards to our staff and our labor to go up and down from their houses. But we managed to get them some kind of essential services passes. So they were able to travel with the specific transportation that was provided by the municipality. So in that case, yes, we had those challenges initially where we could not get our staff to come to work. But the larger issue that we were facing was the change in composition of waste. So essentially, a lot of masks and gloves, which was the bigger, that massive amounts of masks and gloves that started coming in to us. The bigger challenge was that even before lockdown, waste segregation was not happening, and now it has become more important than before that people need to start segregating their waste. So our initial concern was to just keep our staff and team safe. So we took up a few basic things like, of course, giving them your protective gear, but also taking steps like collecting your waste every alternate day. So that it started staying in the bin for 24 hours to 48 hours before we started touching it. We sanitized our waste at the once it reached our facility, sanitized our vehicles, so that was being taken care of. But the bigger issue is, again, what's remained before lockdown and is still prevailing is the segregation of waste that still has not happened. So what we've been doing and focusing on is trying to put out e-learning and do e-workshops where making people understand that even more than before, now segregating your waste is more important. So to make sure that you protect yourself, not even if you don't protect anybody else. So if you're spreading the disease through just contaminated waste, that could be a challenge when it comes back to you. So that was the initial issue that we were looking to target at. But the bigger challenge that we started facing was, even though waste collection was put under essential services, however, disposal or recycling of waste was still shut down. So most of the recycling factories that we were sending it out to are mostly still even shut right now, and largely because waste works in an informal setting. The major hotspots are your Dharavi and your Malegaon, which are your largest informal sectors for waste recycling. So that remained a large challenge throughout the lockdown, and even now, where we feel that that is becoming that since factories are not opening up, we basically run out of space to store our waste, and sooner than later we'll have no other option but to dump this into a landfill. So slowly and steadily, I think the industries are opening up, but that's the bigger challenge that we see in the coming few months. And generally, the trend is such that as soon as the monsoons hit, the recycling factories anyway slow down their purchase. And now that the lockdowns are getting over and now the monsoon is starting off again, so we see that the demand for recycled plastic is going to reduce in the next couple of months. We also had the oil barrel rates going negative in the past few months, which was again making it cheaper to make virgin plastic. So again, the larger issues on the policy and the supply chain problems which we are facing, where once there's not enough demand for recycling material that's coming up, even though we can manage the collection and keep our staff safe at the collection level, but we need channels to dispose them off, and that's the bigger challenge that we're facing right now.
Great, and hold that thought, Rahul. I'll come back to you on the disposal challenges and what we can do collectively. I'll go on to Aseem now, Fluid Robotics. Aseem, are you there?
Hi, Jaya.
Hey, Aseem, so you have used a very interesting new epidemiology tool, basically the science of wastewater-based epidemiology tracing, and you're helping authorities understand the catchment and basically help them outline these containment zones. Can you talk a little bit about that? Can you talk about what you do traditionally and how you've kind of adapted to this situation? And then we'll talk about the tool and its specifics as well.
Sure. So the couple of issues that actually drove us to start Fluid Robotics in the beginning were around water loss and water pollution. So, you have your entire distribution network. So your water pipelines that bring in water to homes, industries, and then you have your sewage pipelines that take that waste out to treatment works. So what happens is because of very little data available of this infrastructure, which is predominantly underground, that leads to a lot of water loss. So almost half the water is actually lost in distribution before it even gets to your tap. And once that wastewater leaves your home or an industry, very little of it actually ends up at a treatment plant. It ends up in lakes and rivers and even contaminates groundwater. So the product that we actually developed to begin with was a small robot that we would put directly into these pipes. It would travel through the pipes and it would do two things. It would identify the health of the pipe and it would create a network map of this pipeline. What that allowed us to do was actually have significant impact on water pollution. So just through mapping of these networks, understanding the capacity of the wastewater networks, we were able to get a lot of the wastewater that is currently going through your nalas or storm drains, get it diverted to your pipe networks to treatment facilities. So we're actually able to increase treatment in cities just by mapping and optimizing the existing infrastructure that was there. So without having to build new treatment plants and new pipelines. So that that worked really well. In that process, what we would actually do is we would send the robots in. The robots would first measure how much flow is going in from a specific nala or a storm drain into a water body. The robot would collect a sample, and that sample would be sent off to a lab for testing, your basic parameters, water quality testing. And then we would do a bunch of mapping. So the robot would go up and down these pipes, look at all the houses that are connected to these pipes. Where is the wastewater coming from? And right at the start of these lockdowns, all our sites where our teams were deployed, everything shut down. So everyone basically had to come back to Pune, where we're based. And there's a complete standstill for a while. However, during that initial process of lockdowns and trying to understand what was actually happening, how the virus was spreading, even how the testing was going on, we discovered a few interesting things. So one of the, the biggest problems that we observed was obviously a limitation of the testing kits that was available. It was very difficult to get everybody tested. The second thing was not everybody was being tested because only the people who were showing severe symptoms were being tested, but there's a huge population that was asymptomatic, right? They weren't being tested and they were still out there spreading the virus. So, those are a couple of interesting things that came up initially. And then a landmark research paper came out in the Netherlands that showed that you could actually trace the virus in wastewater. So there's a bunch of scientists that tested wastewater at treatment facilities, and they were able to actually identify the RNA of the virus in wastewater. And this was roughly about 6 weeks ago. And that was quite interesting because, we've done a lot of the work around wastewater monitoring, collecting samples. What we didn't have is that epidemiology expertise. What we quickly did was we were able to raise some money through grants, research grants. We quickly set up a team internally. So we built capacity. We got a few microbiologists on board, set up a few partnerships with external epidemiologists. And we began developing a modified version of our robots where we could actually collect samples based on international guidelines, because you want to ensure that the RNA survives when you're collecting the sample before it gets sent off to a lab. And then we were able to set up a bunch of lab partnerships. So all you really need is a BSL-2 or higher lab that can basically take this wastewater sample. There are a couple of extra processes that are there before you do RT-PCR. RT-PCR is what is used to test nasal swabs, throat swabs as well. So the test part of the testing process is common, and we were able to sort of feel that modification of this technology. And I wouldn't necessarily call it a pivot, because it's we're still doing a lot of the network mapping still to identify the catchment area. Because if I go take a sample at a location, I need to know where it's coming from. And if the city doesn't have good maps of the wastewater networks, the best way is to send the robot upstream and to figure out what are the houses, buildings connected to the sample. So we're able to develop this, and we're actually deploying this in Mumbai, and a few other cities have signed up as well.
Great, thanks Aseem, and we'll come back to your Mumbai pilot in a bit.
Sure.
I'd like to now go on to Minion Labs and Gokul. Hi Gokul.
Hi Jaya.
Hey, so Gokul, if you could just tell us about what your initial kind of technology offering was with respect to the Minion, and how now you've come up with this device that will basically disinfect various kinds of items, the SAF, the UV SAF that you have kind of developed, and is this something that you see becoming a permanent fixture, like say a microwave oven in people's home? Is that what you're targeting? Is that what you see going forward? And also, are there any kind of safety risks associated with it? So if you could talk a little bit about what you do and what you've developed most recently.
Sure, Jaya. Thank you. And thank you everyone for having me here. So Minion Labs is a smart energy management platform or a provider for saving up to 30% of energy savings. And we are providing the solution to large enterprises and corporates. Currently, we operate with more than 230 enterprises like hospitals, retails, banks, 5+ airports in UAE, and other commercial sectors. And our successful case studies are like Fortis Hospital, who saved 18 lakhs in gross savings from their 1.5 crore electricity bill, Manipal Hospital at 22 lakhs and more. So along with these product sale or energy management solution, we are also involved and working in smart cities along with Schneider Electric and Cisco Systems as an integrator. So we have deployed a lot of Minions, our energy management platform solution at like Paris, Prague, Vienna, and few other cities in Europe. In fact, I was a just miss category that I was in Italy before this lockdown, and I got more than 6 layovers from Europe to Europe, in between the Europe, and then finally I landed to India before the March month. So this is pretty much about Minion Labs. On this COVID-19 crisis, since we are working in this enterprises, and most of them are the commercial sectors, and the lockdown happened to be like complete shutdown to all these commercial sectors. So we used to have two behaviors we used to monitor. The one is like the customer who uses a dashboard. So when they log in, when they are logging off, at what page they are looking at. So this data we get it for internal purpose for use develop the dashboard even more better. So from February month to March month, there was a 95% drop in logging into the dashboard. And also the sales marketing inquiries started reducing because right now energy efficiency is in the problem for these commercial sectors because they are totally shut and there is a minimum amount of energy consumption is going on except the hospitals. Hospitals are still running.
Whatever the issues, you can figure that out later.
So this was a pretty big challenge for us, and we thought like instead of having this as a problem and looking at it, why not we do something? And we initially thought of like utilizing this the lockdown for improving our technology, and we started doing R&D. And out of a casual work from home calls, we came up with this new solution, Minion UV SAF. So it's a kind of a disinfection system. If you look at like, it's not a new or innovative that I can claim, but we can tell like we have repurposed the use of the UVC because the UVC has been 80 years of old technology. It's been traditionally used in hospitals where they used to sanitize the surgery equipments. If you walk into saloons, they use it for a saloon equipment sanitization. And it is commonly found in UV water purifier systems, etc. So what we did is like we had a study and we referred a lot of research journals against this UVC against COVID, how it is working. And it has been proved that UVC is very effective method for SARS-CoV-1, but not for the SARS-CoV-2, which we are working with the ICMR and BIRAC right now to have a sample test with the actual SARS-CoV-2 along with Eurofins based in Bangalore. And so this with the theory based, we come up with the product just in like since the complete the logistics is locked down and we are a bunch of techies based in and around of Bangalore. We found a way of Swiggy and Zomato, and we send the R&D tools and materials through through Swiggy and Dunzo. And we did the R&D in everyone's home itself, and we have come up with the product in the end of February month itself, March month. And later in April, we started piloting and testing, and right now we are in the full fledged of production and almost sold around 450 units of that. But we considered this as a short-term project in order to help us to sustain the company and survive this COVID-19. But we didn't lose the initial scope of energy efficiency, though the market is low. But alternatively, we have figured out a new market opportunity in this energy efficiency, where since the commercial places are shut, there are a lot of people and a lot of consumption is happening in the residential side. So from B2B completely into a B2C product, it is a little bit challenge. And so say for sake, I have to, in B2B, there's Cisco's are one of our largest clients. And I'm only answerable to Cisco if there is any issues or any data related. But here in B2C, there are like hundreds or 200s of people is going to buy, and I'm answerable to each and every one of the person. So I have to set up a separate support team for that to answer the queries and to help them in energy efficiency. So there are few technical and a few resources which is required and which we are working on through. But I felt this residential sector is much big opportunity as of now. And moreover, in almost all the states, the electricity tariffing as well, it has been increased in recent days. And people, the residential are like, people are getting like 3 times the actual bills right away. So we thought this is the good opportunity where we can spin the B2B product into the B2C, and maybe we can capture a good market on to that.
Great, thanks, Gokul. Marwan, now moving to you. Marwan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Marwan. So, you know, Hasirudala has been doing some great work, and you too qualified as an essential service, but you also chose to focus on securing your workers and their families. In fact, you actually sought public support in helping waste pickers who have, you know, some of the most vulnerable groups of workers in the community. And what kind of challenges were you facing? And, you know, what are those challenges that relate to operations that you continue to have? And have things sort of any semblance of going back to normal?
Jay, I think Radhi Connect already mentioned pretty much some of the issues that we faced in this sector. Primarily, one was the initial lockdown stage where the whole passes for people's movement, vehicle movements was an issue and confusion with the police and the government. So that took us a couple of days to sort out, and we looked at all support from the government, from political support to ensure that all these accesses were given to us because, like you rightly said, we are a part of the essential service, and we were in fact the only organization in Bangalore that was providing this service on a private front to bulk waste generators. So we did have a lot of challenges of people segregating waste, but with the help of our customer care network, we were able to communicate with clients in a much more stronger fashion. Other thing what we noticed was there was a huge increase in waste. Now, because a lot of these families, all of them were at home, so there was a lot of waste being generated, especially, believe it or not, there was a lot of packaging waste that was being generated. So unfortunately, like every other part of the country, the entire recycling sector was shut. So we had to hoard a lot of waste in all our centers, in our waste picker go downs. With the help of BBMP, we even faced problems like our private organization, private processing units had to shut down because workers couldn't have access to the facility. And there were issues around the neighborhood. So we approached the government and the local municipality, and they were kind enough to provide us access to their facilities. And we were able to manage services. So that was in terms of challenge. Yeah, prior to the whole continuing of services, we had to ensure the huge population of waste pickers that are there in the city and in the state had no access to food or water. So with our sister concern, Tirudala, the trust, we were able to raise money through public donations and provide, edible food to over 30,000 families across the state. And only because of that effort that we've been able to sustain our relationship with the informal sector and also ensure that our services are not affected because we built that stronger relationship with them.
Thank you, Marwan. And you're absolutely right. I think this whole kind of tiding together, tiding over the situation together has definitely secured your waste pickers for the future. So now coming to the investors, this is, Naga, CM Patil and Vignesh. So basically what's happened, what we're seeing is that between last year and this year, the amount of funding which has gone into, startups has decreased astronomically. And they have been severely impacted. And also there hasn't been the kind of startup growth that you would anticipate in at least the first 4 to 5 months of this year for obvious reasons. Now, Naga, coming to you. Naga, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now coming to you now, several of your investees have been in this, area of sustainability. Have they been impacted one way or another, for better or for worse? And can you share examples of service delivery innovations which you've seen do extremely well or that you do extremely well in the near future?
Sure. I think this sustainability as a space has a huge potential now, right? Because people have been started just talking about this climate change and all that, a little bit not louder yet, because we need to see a flattening of the curve. So until then, the major focus is about the virus. So the moment there is some level of good news comes, there is a flattening, I'm sure there is going to be quite a bit of activity around the sustainability. Already Germany talking about a green recovery, and Netherlands is talking about the similar lines. There's a great potential for everybody in the sustainability space to say that I told you so, right? You played with the nature quite a lot. Now it's a revenge. So, and from the people perspective, there are two kind of people, right? One set is going to be wondering, and what am I doing with my life during this lockdown? The big house I bought, I've never spent this much time. and the car I did not, probably afford, and I bought it in EMI. So I'm just running to pay the EMI. I've not even spent the time with my children. This brought out by the mates from Bihar. So now all of them gone back. So now I'm spending time with them. So this is going to probably create a fantastic thinking process in people that post-COVID, what is the purpose in life? And the second said, don't bother, right? The liquor shop is open, I'll go stand in the line. So I think the more first category will be more, in my opinion. I think that's a great news for everybody in sustainability. That's one. The second is resilience, right? As an entrepreneur, and we have seen amazing these guys, how they've done it. So anybody who showed resilience, there is always a market, there is always investors ready. So we have seen one of my startup in agri traceability and farm to home, he grew 300%, right, during this crisis. So the guys who did not understand his model before the crisis, they are knocking his door to invest. He got a term sheet during the crisis, right, for a next level of investment. Similarly, if you look at Saha's Carbon Masters, even though there are disruption in the space where they were in, where Saha's, we are B2B heavily. So then it took a while to realign about how we can quickly go about the market, which we have not done before. And similar with Carbon Masters as well, that now we have centers running at less capacity. Can we open up new areas for us to feed in the digester, because digester need not go idly, right? So this provided opportunities for them that they never looked at beyond, right? What they were looking at it. So this did create a fantastic opportunities, and even Carbon Master, there is a term sheet coming for the next round of funding, right? So this is what I've seen in the crisis, that resilience, if you're able to show it, and there is always money, because investor is an investor. As an entrepreneur look for opportunity, investor is looking for opportunity as well. But the first priority is our current investment, right? In my portfolio, I've done bridge round for almost 5 of them during this crisis, because they would need a little bit money to stay afloat for next few months, which we have done. So the number one priority is about existing portfolio. At the same time, the people who are hit by other portfolio companies which cannot probably convert the crisis into opportunity, they're going to always look for opportunities, right? So during the stock market crash, 46 lakh crores went out of the market. Where is this money? Sitting in some bank, right? All these guys are investing, they are not starving for food, right? So all they are waiting for the next chance to see, where do I put my money? And wherever people are able to show traction and resilience, and if it is a little bit futuristic, the solution could be, then you have an opportunity, right? So like Saha's started seeing some of our workers not able to go full time, and they started making masks, right? And we had this large pool of textile waste. So we started feeding them, and they started stitching masks, and we started selling the mask, right? So like that, there are always avenues that we've looked at for people to support. If you look at crafts, right, the co-op side, nobody's going to buy a sari today. But quickly what they have done is they started looking at pay forward, right? You just pay later, buy gift cards. They started educating the customer, which we never had a chance, right? You mean that, okay, so can you do a tie and dye at home? So we started doing demos and have a weaver talk to them and see how much it takes to make a sari. Because now we have a lot of attention, because people are now idling at home and they're trying to probably spend more time on, these things. So we get more attention, and the e-commerce, we never bothered, and it just started doing 300% more, right? Because of these activities. So like this, there is opportunity in everywhere. I think we have to repurpose our skills to try to look at the resilience, and always there is a future, and the future looks very, very bright, especially people in sustainability. Yeah.
Great thought, Naga, and hold that thought on resilience. I'll come back to you on that later. Patil, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, Patil. So Patil, from where Sandbox Startup sits, with the mission to enable entrepreneurs and enable innovation for the semi-urban rural communities of India, what during this time has been your biggest challenge with respect to people, the entrepreneurs who are trying to come out of the Sandbox Startups? And also with, millions of informal sector workers making it back home, many of who were directly or indirectly engaged in service provisioning in cities, what do you perceive will be the biggest challenge that will impact the urban service delivery economy? And is this an opportunity for the second tier towns? So Hubli, like for example, where you sit, is this an opportunity for Hubli, or is this something that's just an interim phenomena and things will go back to normal very soon?
Yeah, I think firstly, Jaya, thanks a lot for having me on this panel. I feel this is the best opportunity wherein tier 2 and tier 3 cities can come on parallel with the urban cities now, because now everywhere the situation is the same thing. And just to get you an update, during the lockdown, bulk of our startups started working very closely with the local administrations, because earlier the companies like who were doing the deliveries were not being treated on par in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities because the logistics were very much easily available. But now most of these administration also felt this is the best need. It could be companies like Freshbox or a lot of the essential services, door delivery services, they picked up just like anything. And some of the startups grew more than 200% in that zone. And now they had an easy access for administration to see how it can be taken up. And having said that, on the second side, when we said a lot of these startups where we struggled was some of them who were doing a customer discovery, because we come in an early stage. And we fundamentally believe at Deshpande Startups that this is the best opportunity for somebody to venture into Bharat market, and wherein they can understand what and all. And what it used to take us time to explain e-commerce or online deliveries for next 2-3 years, this COVID actually had helped us understand much faster. And primarily on the healthcare side, if you look at it, everybody were worried on how to sanitize mask making, all of those things were actually be repurposed. Some of the startups who struggled from our ecosystem was who were in mid of customer discovery, who were in early stage, they struggled a bit. But as Naga rightly pointed, some of these startups have grown beyond 300%. Two of our startups also got term sheets from renowned investors because they felt this is the best time for them to scale to the next level. And on the point what you mentioned, the reverse migration, which everybody's been talking, and there's a flood of people who have actually come down. Now, this is the opportunity where we are trying to use them as a gig workers to see, can they be used, can their skill can be upskilled and then used for a lot of these people. And I don't know if you have heard about a company called Boonbox, which entirely repurposed from what they were doing their e-commerce delivery to essential delivery. They have been growing each and every village. Now they are the one who are delivering the essential services. So there is a lot of reverse migration happen, but there is a long way for us to train them and see how it can be taken to the next level. So I feel this is the positive vibes in many ways. And even our incubation center, a lot of our startups started coming online, and then the mentors started coming online because most of the mentors are available now, and where we can actually ask direct questions to the ecosystem players there. I think that has opened up a lot more opportunities, and the gap what we had between urban and non-metro, that has started reducing fairly a bit.
Great, thank you so much, Patil. And this is a very interesting insight that they're getting treatment at par from the administration, which is a new thing. So that's very interesting. Thank you. Vignesh, over to you. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Vignesh. So Vignesh, given how ingrained this whole notion of social distancing has now become in the last few months, some sectors, especially, for example, shared mobility, have taken a hit and slid backwards, where consumer perception of health risks and all have become really high, and the whole trust and confidence in the system will have to be built again. Now, at the same time, in response to the current crisis, different sectors are basically scrambling to create new products and service designs in order to remain relevant in this COVID period. So what changes are you seeing in the energy sector, especially as it relates to electric mobility, which is a huge interest of yours, and just shared systems?
Sure. Firstly, good evening, everybody. I think a lot of very interesting points made by people on this call. So, Jay, I think there's at least three broad trends. Yes, there is definitely a significant hit on mobility. Obviously, that affects people not just because they're not going from office to work and work to office, but there's this whole psychological fear factor, right? That's crept in. What we see that there's in the last 3 weeks actually. In the shared mobility space as well as the managed mobility space, we see that there's at least about 25% pickup from where things were left off. So it didn't go to zero during COVID, but things are back to about 25 to 30% of the pre-COVID numbers. within, you're talking about a month since the sort of really hard part of the COVID situation started. And what that tells is mobility is very important for economic survival and economic growth, right? So while there is about 5% of the country that can live with work from home type solutions, it's just that, and 5% is being generous as well. A lot of people have to be out there, have to go from A to B to earn their livelihood. And therefore, by extension, a lot of people depend on people going from A to B to earn their livelihood. People who set up informal food stalls outside manufacturing or construction sites. While Swiggy's and the urban services that we are used to, right, are seeing a significant jump up. The people who are most affected are your corner stall guys, people who sell tea. And mind you, these are all people who are generating money in the economy. They were providing a service that was needed. So I think from that standpoint, we do see mobility is not just affecting people going from A to B and not being able to pay their EMIs, but also everybody else in the ecosystem who depends on that. And as I said, today's numbers look like at about 25% of pre-COVID numbers, right? With social distancing, I think there's clearly a need for more personalized mobility, right? Or restricted interaction during mobility. People want that. I think there's going to be a much longer way till we get to a point of a cure or a large scale vaccine that people can take things like metro and bus very comfortably. I think we, of course, in India tend to ignore the risks a lot more than others. But the view is that it might take longer. Therefore, there's a higher increase in utilization, in personal utilization, and given the economic condition, I think shared, rented, per use models will tend to be preferred as long as they are safe. Right? So there we are seeing that scooter sharing services, shared cabs that are formal, not informal, but where people know where the person was, can be tracked. There's a standard operating procedure. Those are coming up. The other interesting piece is companies want to, and people want to use the same thing again and again, but the distances have considerably reduced because people are not traveling that far. And therefore, I think electric becomes a natural choice because on a per kilometer basis, while there's a fixed cost component, we are seeing more people wanting to use it shorter distance. And therefore, the push to electric is going to happen. The other reason the push to electric is going to happen is in the current economic situation, I don't see the government being able to afford reducing the levies on petrol, because pretty much that's the only thing that is contributing anything to government coffers today in a significant way. Your land registrations, real estate down. Of course, Naga mentioned alcohol, but even that is down for states that are using. It's a great, big revenue generator. So, revenues are down. So GST is down. Given all of this, the government doesn't have the luxury of being able to reduce the levies on diesel and petrol. Therefore, I think electric transition is a natural segue. And, we are seeing greater global trends as well with countries like Germany, France, leading the way to what they call a Green New Deal. Right? They're saying, let's use this. So, and the interesting part of the Green New Deal or New Green Deal, whatever they call it, is that it's not restricted to their continent alone, right? That money can be used in other places as well, because they believe that there's a global impact of what their industries do. Right? So we are seeing more deal flow there. So broadly, the mobility piece is likely to take at least another 6 to 9 months. That said, because it is so core to our sectors, we have been tracking the recovery, what the path that other countries have, where India lags, and the potential for a vaccine, right? A lot of, I don't know how much is tracked by mainstream media in India, but there's at least 3 candidates ready for large scale testing as a cure/vaccine in the Western world. And the reason that they're accelerating is there is some portion of the scientific community that feels that this virus is likely to rebound in colder climates, right? And therefore they are
trying to race against the clock to have something done by September, October time period. Right? And India, while it is not yet there from terms of drug discovery as advanced, but it is clearly the place where large scale adoption and delivery mechanism companies are present. Right? So I remain cautiously optimistic on something coming through by the end of the year. But mobility, therefore, will probably see a slowdown till then. That said, electric is definitely getting a lot more push. In fact, we have seen clients in some of our companies asking for more electric cars because it's just cheaper to run them after a while. So,
got it. Thank you, Vignesh. And this is a great segue to Lenny. Lenny, are you there?
Hi, yes.
Hi. Yeah. So Lenny is a public health expert, and Lenny, I know this conversation is sort of different for you, but I wanted to start by asking that, based on what you're hearing and what you're seeing around you, there's information, there's a lot of misinformation as well, this time round. And so what gaps in public health policy do you think exist today, which render us basically unprepared to handle an epidemic or some kind of a shock to the system at this scale? And I mean, one is in terms of infrastructure, from the standpoint of the lack of a good network of well-functioning public health centers. That's kind of clearly one. And Kerala had done a lot of preparedness in this regard, and the rest of the country hasn't. And so they have, as a consequence, they've fared well. Although the number of cases there have gone up again. But what needs to happen? And I guess there's a follow-up question on what is your focus in public policy, and are you looking at innovation which is happening around public policy, around public health, around wastewater, energy infrastructure as it relates to public health? Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Jaya. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I'll just take a minute to kind of explain what we do at the Tata Center for Development at the University of Chicago. The organization is an initiative of Tata Trust and the University of Chicago, and through the Tata Center, we do research on key developmental challenges in India. And we look at some of the research findings which are high impact and design programs to be implemented on ground. And learnings from there are also then used for policy engagement. Yeah, so that's just a brief about the organization. Yeah, what I'll do is that I'll start from where my previous speaker left. And I think he built a wonderful narrative wherein he took the discourse out of COVID-19, the crisis, the health crisis, and made connections with the broader issues of what is required to sustain an economy and what tenets of it are important. And I know that being a public health person, you must be expecting me to make some key observations about what needs to be done in the health sector. There is enough being talked about. I'll reiterate some of those, but I personally believe that it's time that we broaden the discourse around addressing COVID-19 and the health challenges. As the previous speaker mentioned, and as the others also mentioned, is that people had issues with supplies of basic facilities. People had issues with infrastructure, which were non-health. For example, the previous speaker mentioned about the whole issue of transport, having access to transport facilities, even to access a health facility. So I think that is what is becoming more and more important. And as public health people like us who both work in the public health space as well as work on other issues and try and build those interlinkages between what happens in the environment space, what happens in the energy space, what happens in the governance space, and look at health more holistically. I think my take would be to broaden that discourse and not to stick to a very narrow medical epidemiological understanding of assessing the crisis of COVID-19, but to take it, maybe take a social determinants route, wherein we talk about we make provision for other things like housing, like nutrition, like access to other facilities, like transportation. These wouldn't qualify as core health requirements or whole facilities, but then these are important. And without these, we saw that across the country, when people were stranded, what was the misery that they faced, and even to access better health facilities, how all of these are important. And yes, so I think with that framing, we will be able to address the bigger issue. So wherein we not only talk about the health risks, but also talk about the COVID related health risks, but we also talk about the non-COVID related health factors also, which are exacerbating. Absolutely, people are having major difficulties in accessing those, and we don't have the luxury of saying that we will deal with TB later, we will deal with renal failure later, we will deal with our patients who need dialysis on a daily basis later. Our COPD patients, we know the numbers of those. So how do we also make provisions for those? And while making all of these, we also don't focus on the healthcare facility alone, but also the preventive space, and also wherein a completely healthy set of population is living, so that they don't fall through the gaps and become a risk factor. So I think that kind of a broader framing and public policy geared towards this broader framing is what will be essential.
Great. So Lenny, just a quick follow-on question.
Yeah, sure.
And we said that at the beginning that, this whole societal stability, which includes health and other things, is very important for the economic stability to come into place. So in terms of just very high level, key recommendations, your point on, health is not just about the present COVID situation, but the broader, situation that we are in, which also includes things like 2 hours of travel time where you have to sit in traffic. It's not good for you. The air pollution that you're encountering on a daily basis, and many other such things. It has, it is associated with your housing conditions, with your livelihood conditions, and many other. So what are some of the key things that, you would say recommend that not only do policymakers look at, but, city planners, people who are trying to innovate in this space? What are some of the things that they should be looking at?
Sure. Jaya, I think a lot of problems a lot of issues, challenges we face now have an origin in the history, the way we have dealt with things. For example, our whole investment in the health sector, we know that it's less than 1% of GDP. And when we talk about it now, we see the crumbling public health system and the private health system, which is not matching up for various reasons. And you bring about this, you talk about this issue of more investment in the health sector. People say, well, that's a long-term issue. You can't be talking about it now. But the problem is, sometime you will have to talk about it. And because of the poor investment, we are seeing what is happening. One is poor investment. Second thing is the lack of upgradation of public health facilities. The universal health coverage, which should have been available to people in this country. We know that what's the coverage of insurance, what is the coverage of private insurance and government insurance, and how there are millions of people who fall through those cracks and are not able to address. The other big issue for me is the whole issue of managing the private sector. We know that today the private health sector is also contributing to treatment, care, prevention, but then, and we also know that there are other issues related to it in terms of like overcharging, there are beds not being available, rational treatment not happening. So without an investment in the public health system and strengthening of the public health system and a private health sector which is non-regulated, it is hard to talk about equity, because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's also important. We are, and COVID is something which I think has been a great leveler, not in a good sense, but people are now realizing that this is not something which only a certain section of the population will have to deal with. Everyone will have to deal with. Why is it that, some of the issues like, ventilators not being available, beds not being available, ICUs beds not being available, these have always been there. And there are, now people are talking about innovative ways of like pooling in facilities and all of that. So that's at another level which needs to be done. And I guess the other important thing, Jaya, is particularly for city planners and others, some of the things which we kind of, I won't say ignored, but we didn't take them within the health discussion is around the infrastructure, is about how should physical planning be, which includes health as an important component. That's something which many of us hadn't even thought about. Like in a city like Mumbai, what is the kind of physical distancing one can talk about is a challenge. water sanitation facilities, entire range of water sanitation and hygiene is something which is the mainstay of COVID now, both at a prevention and cure level. So what are the solutions one can think of which are innovative, which will provide? WASH is the end of the day is the requirement, for management of COVID, along with the social determinants. So that's something we need to talk about. And yeah, that's where maybe policy discourse should head towards.
No, excellent. So that's absolutely right, because health has now taken center stage for whatever reasons, like never before. And so urban planning, although it started out of a health imperative, during industrialization and when things were getting really bad for cities, has come basically full circle, where now again we are having to examine health considerations and not just public health, but individual health. In order to keep an individual secure in their job, in their livelihoods, everything, health is what you need to kind of focus on. And that's how you plan your cities, and the urban form becomes a very important determinant of that. So thank you, Lenny. I'll go back to the startups now. And this is directed to all of you startups that are here. And either or all of you can answer basically. But what kind of, in terms of government schemes that have come up, over the recent past, directed towards MSMEs, how effective have they been? And have any of you tried to access it? And if so, what has been your experience? So, Abhilash, Rahul, Asim, Gokul, anyone, please.
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit. We've seen, given obviously this point in time, investments, have been sort of going up and down. We were personally also looking to raise money at the time of the start, with the lockdown started. And there was a flurry of activity around grants, government grants for tackling the issue of COVID-19. So I think that was one opportunity, where funds weren't available in one place, a bunch of funds became available at another. And not only sort of government, Indian government grants, but there is a lot of push for international collaborations. Tons of countries all over the world are collaborating and trying to provide some kind of a technology or other solution, and even targeted to the Indian context. So we've actually through those programs have come in contact with countries from Australia, US, even Spain, where we formed different partnerships with these organizations to try and sort of bring all our collective skill sets and knowledge base together to provide some kind of a solution.
Great. And anyone else tried to access any of the MSME directed government schemes?
I think we have approached, and we're still waiting to hear from, waiting for a response, but I'm hoping that things work in our favor and we're able to get a few grants through MSME.
Okay. And also, Asim, also as a follow-up on what you were saying, I mean, right now, in terms of being able to access these grants, and also Marwan, as you're trying to do it, what are the challenges, or what is currently lacking? Like, what do you wish they would do better to support startups in the space of urban service delivery?
Yeah, well, so in terms of grants as well, there was, the focus was more on solutions that were already there, ready to be deployed. So the focus was more on the short term, getting your PPE kits, ventilators, all of that, and that was great. So we, however, there was a bunch of research, involved in what we were trying to build out. So fewer grants were available, but we were fortunate to sort of take advantage of a couple of those that were. However, on the government side, funds have dried up, everywhere. So our main source of revenue is working with governments, working with cities. And there is a lot of uncertainty as to now going forward, how are all of those projects going to pan out? A lot of times we piggyback on, construction projects as well. And there are some, money there is also not, readily available in the near future. So there is still some uncertainty. We're not entirely sure our conventional line of services when they would pick up. However, we see what we are developing now for COVID-19 detection as having a lot of opportunities going forward. So, now it's COVID-19. We could easily expand this to track other pathogens in wastewater and possibly even help prevent or predict the next outbreak.
Right.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, applying for these grants is one thing, but what we did proactively was, I mean, while we wait for responses or any movement from the government's front, we initiated new services in this crisis period because I mean, majority of our business verticals have slowed down because of, social gathering. We provide a service called event waste management services and housekeeping. And now since there's no events taking place, well, it's slowly picking up. Sanitizing services is something that we have started because we had to look at alternative intermediary solutions during this time where we can provide those livelihood opportunities to waste pickers. So I think that was a proactive measure from our end.
Okay. Rahul, Gokul, have either of you all tried successfully or unsuccessfully?
So, yeah, from our perspective, we haven't really gone out to look out any government schemes for our company. So we are not very aware about that. But what we've done is that since largely the people that we work with are below poverty line, are waste pickers that we're working with, we've managed to, the people that we had actually supported initially and got their Jan Dhan accounts open, they have got some compensation from the government directly through that. So we made them get access to those schemes. And we actually are looking at this as an opportunity where trying to formalize the informal sector is something that we can push more aggressively at this stage. Since most of the informal sectors are they just cannot operate at this point of time. So by giving them the advantage that if you do start formalizing yourself by simple things as just opening up a zero balance bank account, you will be getting these kind of provisions from the government directly. So that's one thing that we have tried to get. In terms of grants, I see that most of the grants have now been redirected to directly healthcare COVID related services. So even the projects that we were pitching initially have now gone on hold. Honestly, from the private sector, not from the government sector. So we've seen that companies are now redirecting their funds to healthcare services. So our projects have been put on shelf as of now for the next few months. So yeah, I mean, otherwise we haven't yet gone out and looked for these MSME loans that are available specifically for working capital. Also because we're not ready, we don't really need them at this point in time. So we've been working towards giving some support to our workers instead of looking at support for ourselves at this stage.
Got it, Rahul. And just a follow-up question on that, you said that disposal was becoming a bigger challenge, and while this kind of the pile continues to accumulate, you might get to the point where you'll have to go to the landfills and all of that. Have you been engaging with the civic authorities to let them know about the severity of the situation, that they need to take action, that these recycling facilities need to open up? What kind of engagement have you had?
So since most of the recyclers are set up outside Maharashtra, so even though when we talk to our local authorities, it doesn't come under their jurisdiction of actually giving permission to these recycling factories to open up. They're largely, for us, it's largely on the belt of Daman and Gujarat, where most of our material is being sent to, maybe plastic or paper. So we have been pushing from our side, but I don't see, I mean, it's talking against a wall for that matter of fact, because they don't have the provisions right now. However, the recyclers themselves are also looking at starting up their businesses. They've been hit for the past 3 months when their services were shut down as well. So a lot of them tried to start their services. So depending on the initial guidelines of the orange, green and red zone, wherever they were there, they tried to start their services. But as soon as the migrant labor were allowed to go back home, essentially the factories that even started off had to shut down within the first week of operations. So those were the challenges that we were facing. But we're hopeful that slowly the industry is going to start normalizing. And it's not just with the recyclers, but it's also with the final product. So a lot of the formal recycling sector is for PET. And PET is being recycled into polyester. Now the demand for the final polyester fabric is not there as yet. So we're seeing that until unless the allied industries also start up, we are going to see this as a challenge going forward. But yeah, I think we hopefully should have some movement that starts within the next couple of months. But the government is not, so even though we are under essential services, I don't think healthcare and COPS is something that has been looked at. The frontline workers, the sanitation workers have been ignored in the whole situation. So, I mean, there's not much policy that's directly coming out towards our sector, is what we're seeing right now, at least.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Rahul. Gokul, did you want to chime in?
Yes, Jaya. So, you know that Minion Labs has got a PMEGP loan. That's a MSME loan from the Prime Minister Relief Entrepreneurship Development Fund initially. And recently I got a call from the PMEGP department that they are issuing around another 20% of the principal amount without any guarantee, without any collateral, which was like we have received that fund as well without like I going to the bank physically. They just did everything, the paperwork digitally, and they had closed it. Apart from that, from the revision of the MSME definition and as well as the COVID-19 scheme, there was for small scale and medium enterprises, there are 3 lakh crores fresh loans with 12-month moratorium, and a 4-year loan was like announced without any collaterals to be provided, without any guarantees or fees, anything. And the central government gives guarantee for principal amount and interest amount to both banks and NBFCs. So that was a little bit interesting, but on the brighter side, Minion Labs was like a little bit on the luck side in this COVID-19 crisis, because we were already profitable on the subscriptions we are getting on the energy analytics, and on top of that we just closed an investment round on February 2020. So we thought like to pass on this MSME loan right now, but we have enabled that. We got the 20% extra on the existing loan PMEGP.
Okay, so you're still talking about MSMEs and startups having to be lucky. So basically you have to meet a certain threshold criteria, and not everybody has access to what is out there, it sounds like.
Correct. So Minion Labs, I know that Minion Labs has the certain threshold, and we had categorized into this small enterprises, but not everyone has that. So the other MSMEs who doesn't have the threshold, then obviously that's not a brighter side for them.
Okay. Patil,
Yeah, just
yes.
the point. See, I mean, though there were a couple of schemes from Government of India which have been offered. I think 2 or 3 of the startups actually got funds from that particular schemes, not directly from the loans what you're talking, but programs like Kavach is there, which has been launched by DST, and also some of these Prayas programs. They did get some sort of funds over there.
How well known are these programs among your startups, Patil?
Yeah, I think I can guarantee our ecosystem is completely aware of it, because the moment we get an info from the government directly, and then at least it's been circulated to our ecosystem base very openly. And also government is doing pretty large efforts to see how it can be taken up. Last week I did a webinar in last May 31st, where I had a head of DST coming and announcing some of these schemes as well. We had about close to 4,000 plus audience looking at it. But again, they are trying their best via their incubators network and go to the next level.
All right. Naga, question for you. I think a lot of what we saw, the problems that some of these startups are talking about and their ability to operate in cities, I think a lot of that had to do with the inability of having a narrative which qualified them as an essential service. And I think, the waste funds are obvious, but I think with water and energy, while efficiency and management of resources remains a top concern for cities, these startups who are trying to do work in that space don't necessarily qualify as essential when these kind of things happen. So what kind of advice would you give them? And have you had to kind of reorient some of your startups and your mentees to say that you need to reorient your narrative, or here's how you need to pitch your narrative better?
No, absolutely. I think we need to be very clear about how do we align with these areas. Now, if you're in this health and essential and online education, you are a hot startup right now. But how do you position yourself is what you need to work on. Like for example, this water example that someone was mentioning about, this water is an essential today, right? So you have to position yourself that how I'm delivering food or vegetables. I think water is in the similar level, that how am I saving by recycling or helping in whatever the models that are applying into my system. So that is something that you need to go clearly narrate and with the local authorities first to understand that you have a clear movement of things between the city limits, right? The second is about clearly looking at the repurposing. You know, we have seen a guy working in agriculture, IoT, and quickly came up with the same sensor-based, sensor-based moisture control. It opens the irrigation valve, and he put the same idea into building sanitation tunnel, right? So, and it was so early in the probably first week of the lockdown, and we heard the central government listen to him and told that don't use chlorine, look at herbals. So he got that input, and immediately authorities started putting out, right? So it's about how quickly you are able to align with the cause. If you just keep saying the same story before crisis, that I am this and that, nobody's going to understand. But if you're able to align with what is currently happening, then you can immediately get their attention, because this is a great time. You don't need any marketing, zero marketing is required. Demand is pent up big time. But if you're aligned with what is needed, like for example, a guy, Native Special, he sells, native snacks. He sells halwa probably from Tirunelveli. Nobody's going to buy halwa now. But he quickly saw that Ayush department has announced about natural immunity boosters, right? So I sent him a circular, and then he just started looking at where are these products, and he's doubled the revenue within 2 weeks. We did a shipment to US. One of the Kashayam went to US in a plane during the crisis, right? So this is where how you are going to repurpose exactly what you're trying to do and align with what is currently in need, right? If you're not moving very fast and you're going to, on the wayside, this fresh world, we have electric vehicles, right? 45 vehicles running around, and during the crisis, he's not able to sell. Then because we cannot put up a shop in front of an apartment, nobody's allowing. So we acquired a company which was selling meat. They were selling meat online. They were struggling. We acquired a company during the crisis. We acquired the technology that we can sell online. And we started selling vegetables from our hub warehouse using the online platform and use our vehicles to deliver it. So change the model within 2 weeks. I think this is what I mentioned about the resilience. During this crisis, don't think too much. You got to jump. There is no time to analyze what is going to happen to me. I call this a pivot to adapt. Right? If you're not adapting to the current needs, whatever the great solution that you have, and people may be able to understand during the crisis, they may not understand now, unless you change the language and change the narrative. People have done it very, very well, how they're positioning about the essential side, like Sahas. So when some of the workers who are not able to work in B2B, they work with the Sahas NGO, they just hired an auto rickshaw and then started doing awareness. The police loved it, right? Police were just giving this, wow, you are doing off the job what we are doing. They just went around about how, this hygiene is important. They just put a, loudspeaker in auto rickshaw and they started talking in the nearby villages. So like that, how quickly you can repurpose, your skills, your ability. We have this fabric Mon, she was selling handloom, and she was selling her handlooms to apparel manufacturers. And during the crisis, she saw that the textile factories are idling, and she quickly switched over to making masks, right? This is like second day of the lockdown, she sent me a catalog, and she was way ahead of the game. Within first week, she got a 3 crore worth of order with 100% advance, right? So this is the ability that you have in front of you. Just change the narrative, start looking at how can we align with the current needs. You may be providing the same solution, but just you have to pack it differently so that people are able to understand what you are talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great point. And actually expanding on that, what I would like to also ask you and also Patil and Vignesh here is, what changes in innovation specifically in wastewater energy, essential public services and actually health facilities also now come into that. What do we need to see happen there which will help build the resilience of our systems? So one is the resilience of our entrepreneurs and the innovators, but what will help build the resilience of our system so we are not caught, unprepared the next time? So I'll start with you, Naga.
I think this crisis is a great opportunity if you look at, because India works very well in crisis, right? So when there was a crisis, Manmohan Singh opened up FDI, nobody asked him any question. So it was open, boom, done, right? So they were very good in crisis. So look at the 20-year agriculture reforms done in last 2 weeks. And if you put it for debate, we'll keep talking next 20 years, right? Labor reforms happen. Good or bad, it is happening, right? It is helping. The APMC reforms we've been sitting on for a long time. It happened last 2 weeks. And whether which government doesn't matter. Country does very well during crisis. That's an opportunity that we have. Use the crisis before even anybody think. Start implementing some of the solution that we want. Even WRA, you have a great opportunity now. Just get all these guys who never listened to us, just tell them what is about sustainability. So we're doing a similar one in agriculture. The last 2 weeks, I was able to put together 30 organizations which never talk to each other. They're coming together, right? And the amount of information that India has, I was surprised. There is this one database that's sitting idle, and that data is what given to NASA. And we have no access, but NASA is accessing to the data from India, right? So we are able to get all these guys talk to each other, which they never talk, because during the crisis, everybody realized that I alone cannot solve the problem. And they are coming forward. So we have next 3 months before people wake up, right? We have to move forward, especially from government policy side, even the entrepreneur side, whatever the thing that we want. The second point is about, with WRA, we have done quite a bit around sustainability in the cities. And we talked about the urbanization is not an answer, I think, which proved very, very, very well today that, people lived in Bharat and they just said bye to India and then walked out, right? The moment the second day lockdown is announced, that's a fantastic news that we were able to hide these stories. When the US president came, we built walls so that we don't show the slums to him. But everybody saw, the whole world saw that when the people walked on the street, where is the lockdown? And millions of people on the street, BBC put it out, the whole world saw it. That's a fantastic news because we know where now the problem is, right? Only few of us were talking about the problem, now the whole world knows. So it becomes easier for us today when you say reverse migrants, everybody understands this. Previously, they were all ignoring the slums in cities. Today, everybody understands we have a problem in reverse migration. Awesome, right? So how do we leverage this and just start telling about people? And there is an opportunity, people going back, which is a good news. And then we can probably clean up some of the city's problem that we have been having for a long time as well. For example, today we are arranging an event with Satwa. The construction industry is coming forward and says that the labor charges are going up. I said, awesome, right? Because you have a boatload of people coming down, or train load of people coming down Bihar, UP, working for $5,000. They're not there anymore, right? So now we have to invent, cannot put bodies on problem. We have to innovate about put people in not inhumane things. We need to put people for creative work. So these people who went back, they're taking a lot of skills back with them. They can go build the rural India where, rural livelihood mission, when I go to visit villages, there's no youth. There's only elderly and probably children are there, right? I was asking the livelihood mission that what livelihood you are saving here? They said, no, it is a retirement plan for these women. So because all the youths left the villages. Today, there's opportunity now, NRLM and all these guys can train these people and so that we can rebuild the rural India. Now the work for WRA is reducing, right? Because the cities in this current model cannot fix at all. You saw that, I think the picture you put for this session is really awesome, right? Every time I land in Mumbai, I saw the blue sheets. I get depressed, right? So when in our lifetime can we fix the blue sheets? So here is an opportunity. Here is an opportunity for us to probably start looking at that and stop this migration. If people come in, they should live in India, not Bharat. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Thank you, Naga. Patil, I'll go to you and just add on to that question. And also just quick note, I have permission from the host to extend this webinar by another 10 minutes. So we'll do that because we want to take some of the questions from the Q&A section, which are happening as well. But Patil, to you, the question that I just raised that, how do you build resilience in the systems? And you've been working with the municipal corporation in Hubli And also, I mean, how do you get some of these innovation and these entrepreneurs to address low-income communities? So whether it is in terms of, water access and quality or whatever, because now you're washing hands, but where do the low-income communities wash their hands if that pot is not accessible to them? And many such issues, waste and all of that. So I think question to you, Patil.
So I think bulk of it has been answered by Naga, the way how one has to relook at it. The one distinct difference what I've seen in last 3 months is a lot of local authorities listening to entrepreneurs now. Earlier, they thought it's only happening in urban cities, but now for every damn solution, what they think, in fact, I'm part of the COVID-19 team in the Hubli-Dharwad region. And if any problem which has been discussed, they kind of get all the entrepreneurs into the system now. And they see, can he or she give a diversified opinion over there? And with respect to the mask, what you said, right? So each of us were only talking about face masks, but now this actually opened up an opportunity to see, can we get a face shields? Like for example, I just had one here, even it's all reusable one. I mean, we were all worried about how do we increase the waste and all. We got somebody at a piece which can be printed, and it's a small thing which can be given for all the frontline workers, and this sheet can be replaceable. And then see how it can. Now this has opened up a lot more opportunities. In fact, for a lot of micro entrepreneurs who actually were there in the city, our micro entrepreneurship team worked very well, and then they say that they were able to get close to 80,000 masks in less than a week's time for all the frontline workers over in the SDMC part of it. I see the coordination is very, very better now. And as Naga rightly pointed, right, everybody now understands Bharat. That's something which is the biggest advantage what COVID has given for us, because we need not explain what exactly Bharat is all about now. Now people understand agriculture sector very better. And the specific, when you say water, I think there is an essential part of it. Most of the people in Hubli-Dharwad, they are using sanitizers more often. And then all the distillers which is being used to produce a lot of alcoholic side of it, they are actually now producing a lot of sanitizers. And there is where they're actually trying to reduce out of it. And but the our city has done pretty well in terms of curtailing and in terms of awareness and all. They were able to use a lot of this natural resource and then see, can they employ a lot of small and micro entrepreneurs to see, can they come with the substitutes of it. I think I'm very optimistic, and when it comes to building resilience, right, now I need not explain anybody what is need of the hour, because people understand the difference between nice to have and the need of the hour very, very, very clearly. So of course, entrepreneurship is a journey. I mean, nobody starts entrepreneurship journey for the end of success. It's a journey, it's a up and down, and it is, if somebody enjoys this journey, this is for them. And India is very good in crisis management. That I can completely agree there. The moment when we are hit with a lot of roadblocks, we innovate things there. I think, yeah, that's where I would sum it up and post my. lot of startups are coming to us now. How do we actually love and leverage the ecosystem what DF has developed in the last 12 years now? I need to deliver this sort of services to agriculturists. Can we partner with you? Collaboration has gone to its peak. I mean, believe me, the way people now are understanding what is a benefit I get working with a lot of people who are working in the rest of the pyramid, that is being very widely appreciated.
Great. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I see it's a promising time for somebody who is building a solution for Bharat, and we would love to extend all the possible support for them, considering what the ecosystem, what we have nurtured in the last 12 years. I think this is the best time what we have now.
Great. Thank you, Patil. Vignesh, coming to you, same question, building resilience in the system. And another one that I'll add on for you is, are you looking or re-looking at your KPIs or your key performance indicators when you're assessing, new startups in this space? Have you retweaked any of that based on what you're seeing and based on where you feel the direction of travel is going to be?
Yeah, the answer to the second question is easy. No, absolutely, we have to. I don't think we have a choice. So, however, how we are relooking is the key question. I think we've also drawn up a evaluation, not just merely on the criteria that we had looked at the time of investment, but to also go back and say what are the strengths that exist in these businesses, right? Therefore, that can then help the business pivot. For example, is it technology, right? Is it operational excellence? Is it just the fact that they're able to get to the product and I iterate faster. So I think in each case, we've started to drill down and say, what is the inherent strength, and therefore how do we use that to stay resilient as a business? Interestingly, in one of the cases when we did this for our investments, what came out was the fact that they had the largest database on medical deliveries in the country, right? And that in itself was very valuable. So I think those kind of things are coming up. Coming back to at a systemic level, which is I think the broader question. No doubt, I think the world, not just India, but India far more starkly, has seen the impact of what COVID has done to people who have access versus who don't have access to economic mobility, upward mobility. Just like how there are these new phrases, right? The new normal. The other very commonly used phrases, we are in the storm but not in the same boat, right? So all of these just indicate to us that the three things that for me have come out so starkly, and therefore at a systemic level we need, as a country and as people who are contributing to the vibrancy of the startup system. I think, and I keep stressing this with a lot of businesses, but now more than ever, understanding your working capital is super important, right? What does your business really do about working capital? Whether you're a small business, large business, doesn't matter, right? How are you funding it? Who helps you manage it? Therefore, who are you dependent on truly, right? And I would argue that 9 out of 10 cases, you're hardly dependent on the banks in India today. And that's both the challenge and the opportunity. So that is one. The second is, it has stressed that local government is actually a key role player in all of this, right? You can come up with any sort of lockdown metrics, etc., nationally, but fundamentally the ability to deliver and manage is at the local government level, right? Whatever you announce from Delhi, unless your local government officials understand and are able to translate it, it makes no difference, right? So I think there's this classic case where people have been wanting to go from state A to state B. They get this pass, all online done. They get to the border. At the border, they said, "Who's that state to give me jurisdiction on my district?" Right? So therefore, I think there is a need to strengthen local government's ability. Once you strengthen their ability to tackle anything health and revenue, which is agricultural output, etc., then you pretty much started building that system. So that's at a national or at a state level. I think local governments are, this pandemic has highlighted that local governments are super important, right? And lastly, I think it comes down to saying, what is this whole Nirbharta about, right? Nirbharta is not just that you boycott or you don't allow for a global flow of trades, but it is to say that you have built in resilience in your credit systems, economic systems, as well as your small and medium enterprises, that they can actually sustain. I think India, you had asked an earlier question to the startups, but we as investors face the same challenge. I think there's probably only 1 to 2% of businesses that have been able to access what the government has announced, right? And that's a tragedy for the majority of the medium and small enterprises. And it's also a problem because India is therefore saying medium and small enterprises cannot thrive here. Whereas the largest job and economic prosperity creator in any economy has been medium and small enterprises. So now this is more stark than any other time. Therefore, an opportunity, as Naga and Patil have said, that you can make use of this sort of real stress to convert it. And I really hope that happens. But we have to support and invest in the medium and small enterprise ecosystem in India.
Great. Thank you, Vignesh. Last question to you, Lenny, and then we'll wrap up with just last thoughts from everyone. So Lenny, I mean, especially, with the lower income neighborhoods, that is a big concern. And that is, where those gaps in building resiliency in cities also have come through, and they've been laid bare, frankly, in this whole scenario. So I think in terms of, what kind of innovations, whether it's policy or product or service, what kind of innovations do you think are needed? And what are some of the things or the areas where innovators and, product designers, others, policymakers can start thinking about to address the needs of lower income communities as it relates to access and equal access to basic services in cities?
Thanks, Jaya. Well, I think maybe I'll just kind of draw from what Gokul mentioned. I think my whole concern is about this issue of the framing, framing it as a key health issue and not looking at other allied challenges is actually the root cause of many problems. So so while we look at it or we address it as a health pandemic, but we do have a broader approach wherein we do, and that's where the lower socioeconomic strata, the population from the lower socioeconomic strata suffered the most in terms of lack of proper hygiene, proper housing facilities, maybe transport, nutrition, and several allied factors which are important. And in terms of innovation, well, I don't think it's always possible to think of a one size fits all solution, but still some of the things which one has seen may work is, this whole issue of making wash facilities more sustainable and more, user friendly, cost effective is something which people are talking about. And if it can be looked at both at the community level, also at the health facility level. See, all health facilities are not of the level of a global corporate chain, right? So we have ranges and ranges of health facilities. So it's important to equip them as well, because vast majority goes there. Then the other thing is about upgrading the public health facilities. A small little thing that I realized that, last 15 years, we've been talking about this thing, that in a metropolitan city, we still don't have information, real-time information about availability of beds, ICU facilities, blood facilities. This demand has been generated for years, more than a decade, but still we don't have everything. And surprising that today we are in an electronic medical record period, when that is the case, when everything else is kind of computerized and driven by technology, why something like this? Otherwise, we will keep hearing this, that somebody was refused at 8 different hospitals and died before reaching the 9th one, because these are things which if some of these bright young people can think of is, how do we pool in facilities? How do we have a technology platform which gives real-time information about availability of these facilities, maybe at least at a city level? And then this whole issue of, testing and treatment and all of that comes in. But the other little thing I wanted to mention, particularly to our friends who are in the startup world, is that what is now important is to also think of scale. Because I was working with a lot of groups in Delhi and Mumbai and realized that there were fantastic ideas, fantastic solutions, whether it was waste management or it was water quality measurement and wastewater treatment. Scale became an issue. And so how do we build that in? I think Naga was fantastic when he said, how do we repurpose? But we also take these additional challenges into account when we plan.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. And now we'll give the last word to our entrepreneurs who are here. And just one thing. So, based on the situation that you've been through in the last couple of months and your whole sort of journey of entrepreneurship, the things that you're trying to accomplish, and what you see the future holds with health, continuing to remain front and center in the discourse in the coming sort of time that we see. What is the one thing that you want from the stakeholders that are part of this ecosystem? So whether it's government or investors or anybody, apart from the obvious money and, better funding and all of that, what is the one thing that you would want from this ecosystem, and what kind of support are you looking for? Gokul, do you want to start?
Yes, Jaya. So for me, for Minion Labs, end of the day, if I go and install a Minion energy meter at the client place, then it's a sales meet. And so on this note, since the logistics and the lockdown is little ease, we started going back to the normal routine and doing those activities with 30% of employees at the office. And better if this actually continues without any further lockdown completely or anything, and also without compromising on the COVID-19 crisis. And So this could help us, or maybe Minion Labs or Minion Labs like a startup who are actually a hardware startup and who make sales out of like Go and deploys. So this should be helping us. And on terms of financial, since Minion Labs is not hit on the COVID-19, so I do not have experience to talk on that. Maybe some other startups are much relevant who got into this financial crisis may talk. So this is from my side.
All right, thank you. Asim, one thing that you would want from this ecosystem going forward?
I would say better collaboration across different startups from different sectors. And by collaboration, I also mean, sharing of a lot of insights which generally get limited to, the one or two startups that work closely together. So one of the things that we are doing from our end as well is the protocols that we are developing for sampling of the wastewater, for testing to ensure we follow the right process based on where the wastewater is coming from, right up to identification of the virus. We plan to open source some of that information from our end as well. So we want to publish that information, make it broadly accessible to anybody who wants to run this across cities in the country. And I think collaborations of that sort would probably enable better outreach, better impact overall in the ecosystem.
Absolutely. Thank you. Rahul, over to you.
Yeah, so probably one positive out of the whole COVID situation for us has been that apart from health being a priority, also hygiene is becoming somewhat of a priority for most people. And one thing that I would expect is that now that people have like some people, when once their waste picker wasn't coming to their house for the past 3-4 days, they've realized what is the importance of their waste being managed. And apart from the COVID situation, also the mismanagement of waste has been very lethal to human health all throughout. So probably if people just apart from just washing their hands and keeping that personal hygiene, if they also look at just cleanliness and hygiene and managing their waste properly, I feel that's one ask that I would look from the entire ecosystem apart from the other things.
Sure. Marwan, similar line to add?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've had quite...
Yeah, just... Okay, the point what Rahul mentioned, that this is really fantastic. Yeah, if you're not doing that, you should do that. Sometimes take things for granted, right? So you need to ensure that after the waste is picked up, you send the picture of the person who did it, send to the customer, have them send a thank you note, right? To tell them that, how he is risking his life coming on the outside and trying to save your life, putting his life in risk. So which we have done it very well in the agriculture side, where when after each delivery of our vegetables, we ensure that we put a picture of saying that today he risked his life 36 times, right? So because after this problem, people go back normal, so we have taken them to the guilt trip, right? So that's how we prove that to be essential. And the agriculture side, we are able to do that very well, but I think sanitation side, I think you guys have not done a great job. You should be more louder. That message should be very good point, Rahul. Just keep going back and tell every waste picked up. You should have the customer send the thank you note to that person, right? Don't just put a sanitation prakarma. Put the name of the person that today Mangama picked up X and Y from you. Please send a thank you note. Yeah, good point.
Marwan, do you want to?
Yeah, so all I'm saying is I think the government should look at a very inclusive process of involving all the necessary people who are engaged in any sector and have a public-private engagement to ensure that the needs are met from the ground up, that's one. And another thing is have a stronger awareness base within their interdepartmental infrastructure. I think there's a huge gap between the center and state, within the center itself, within the state itself. And if that, structure is strengthened, I think we can go miles together.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. We have actually come to the end of our time. And I would just like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for engaging with us today. We would, of course, keep following your journeys, and we will hopefully, reconvene and see how we are doing maybe 6 months later or a year later. But until then, thank you very much. Stay safe. Hope you're doing very well, and that business continues to prosper and flourish. Thank you to all.
Thank you all.
Everyone,
Bye.
thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much.